Late 1965. The Beatles, exhausted by fame and pop formulas, faced a Christmas deadline and a restless urge to reinvent themselves. What sparked the leap from simple love songs to surreal introspection and sitar-fueled breakthroughs in the making of Rubber Soul? The story isn't just about the sound, it's about how pressure, rivalry and rebellion would force the band to transform music forever. So how did four young men, trapped by their own success, break free? By the autumn of 1965, the Beatles were running on empty. Months of relentless touring had blurred into a routine of airports, hotel rooms, and screaming crowds. The excitement of early fame had faded, replaced by exhaustion and the dull ache of repetition. Each night the band played the same set of hits, barely able to hear themselves above the noise. Behind the scenes, the pressure to deliver something new for the Christmas market was mounting. The old formulas no longer satisfied them. Restlessness crept in, not just with the music, but with the roles they had been handed. The search for a fresh direction became urgent, and the studio offered the only real escape. Bob Dylan's shadow stretched across the writing sessions that autumn. John Lennon in particular began to look inward, drawing from Dylan's blend of poetry and vulnerability. The lyrics on Rubber Soul shifted away from the simple declarations of early Beatles hits. Instead, songs like Nowhere Man and Girl wrestled with doubt, longing, and self-examination. Lennon's verses took on a surreal, sometimes biting edge, exposing insecurities and searching for meaning beyond romance. This new honesty ran through the album, opening space for more complex emotions and stories. The Beatles were no longer just chroniclers of young love, they were writing about themselves and about the world as they saw it. On October the 21st, 1965, a new sound drifted through EMY Studio 2. Midway through the Rubber Soul sessions, George Harrison picked up a sitar, a move that would echo far beyond that day. The instrument was not part of the original plan for Norwegian Wood. The basic track was already down, with John's acoustic guitar and vocals shaping the song's delicate mood, but something was missing. Harrison, fascinated by the sitar's exotic voice after hearing it in London shops and on recent records, decided to try it out in the studio. Without ceremony, he sat down, found the notes by ear, and began to play. The band mic'd up the instrument and rolled tape. Harrison's sitar riff wound through the verses, weaving a drone into the second and fourth. The effect was immediate, a shimmering, otherworldly presence that transformed the song. Ringo added tambourine and a soft slap of knees during the bridges, but it was the sitar that lingered. This was the first time the instrument had appeared on a Beatles record, and its spontaneous arrival marked a turning point. What started as an experiment became a signature, opening the door to new textures and ideas that would shape the Beatles' music and pop itself for years to come. A few days after the sitar debut, another experiment unfolded in EMY Studio 2, this time at the piano. The song was In My Life, and it needed something to bridge its verses. John Lennon wanted a solo with a classical feel, almost baroque in spirit, but nothing they tried sounded quite right. George Martin, the group's producer, sat at the piano and worked out a melody inspired by Bach. The problem was not the notes, it was the sound. On a regular piano, the solo felt too ordinary, lacking the crisp, old-world character Lennon imagined. Martin reached for a technical solution. He recorded the piano part at half its normal speed, playing the melody an octave lower and at half tempo. When the tape was played back at regular speed, the piano's tone changed completely. It became bright and spiky, almost like a harpsichord. The effect was immediate and striking, transforming the solo into something both familiar and strange. This was not just a clever trick, it was a new way of thinking about the studio itself. With a bit of tape manipulation, Martin had created a sound that could not be reproduced on stage or with a standard instrument. The solo on In My Life, recorded in mid-October 1965, became one of the album's most distinctive touches, a quiet revolution hidden in plain sight. On the night of October 13th, 1965, the studio lights burned long past midnight as the Beatles locked in on a new track. The song was Drive My Car, and the sessions stretched over 5 hours, one of their first true late-night marathons. The air in EMY Studio 2 was thick with the kind of restless energy that comes from chasing a sound just out of reach. Paul McCartney, always eager to push the band's arrangements, started playing with the bass line, twisting it into something punchy and unexpected. Instead of following the usual patterns, he leaned into a groove inspired by the American soul records he loved, bouncing notes off the rhythm and letting the low end carry the song. The result was a playful, almost cartoonish motif, punctuated by the now famous beep-beep vocal line that gave the track its swagger. The band kept at it, swapping ideas and trading instruments until the groove felt right. By the end of the night, Drive My Car had its hook, built around McCartney's inventive bass and a rhythm section that refused to sit still. What began as a throwaway idea in the studio became the engine of the song, proof that sometimes the best parts happen when nobody is watching the clock. 13 days. That's all the time the Beatles had to create what would become one of their most influential records. The sessions for Rubber Soul began on October 12, 1965, and by early November, the final mixes were complete. In total, the band and their engineering team logged just over 113 hours inside EMI Studio 2. The pressure was relentless. Every hour counted, and every take had to serve a purpose. The studio itself was no longer just a place to capture sound. It became a laboratory for invention, with 4-track tape machines setting strict boundaries that demanded creative workarounds. Each track had to be filled with intention. With only 4 tracks available, the engineers, Norman Smith, Ken Scott, and Phil McDonald, worked closely with George Martin and the band to layer instruments and vocals. When all 4 tracks were full, they would bounce them down to 1, freeing up space for more overdubs. This process, while risky, allowed new ideas to take shape quickly, but it also meant decisions were sometimes irreversible. Mistakes could not be undone, so every experiment carried weight. Late nights became routine. Sessions often stretched past midnight, fueled by a mix of adrenaline, caffeine, and the occasional smoke in the echo chamber. The band's discipline surprised even the engineers. Despite stories of psychedelic excess, most work was done with clear heads and sharp focus. Paul McCartney later recalled how the band would wander the empty halls of Abbey Road, feeling both ownership and isolation. The compressed schedule forced the group to trust their instincts, capturing inspiration as it happened. Rubber Soul's sound, tight, urgent, and full of surprises, owes as much to the ticking clock as it does to the band's restless ambition. Rubber Soul's identity was as much about attitude as it was about sound. The album's title, a sly twist on British slang, poked fun at bands accused of lacking true soul. The Beatles called it Rubber Soul, a playful jab at the idea of plastic soul. Paul McCartney had picked up the phrase after hearing a black musician use it to describe white musicians' attempts at R&B. It was an inside joke, but also a statement. The band was self-aware, ready to pull apart their own image, and not above a bit of mischief. The cover, instantly recognizable, owes its look to pure accident. Photographer Robert Freeman spent an afternoon shooting the band in John's garden, snapping dozens of frames. Later, as Freeman projected the slides onto a piece of cardboard to mock up potential covers, the card slipped backwards. The photo stretched, elongating the Beatles' faces. Instead of rejecting the mistake, the group loved it. The warped image matched the album's spirit, distorted, playful, and a little off-kilter. What started as a technical mishap became a deliberate choice, turning a simple portrait into a visual echo of the album's experimental edge. Producer George Martin saw something new in these sessions. He later said that Rubber Soul was the first time the Beatles treated an album as a complete artistic statement, not just a collection of singles. For Martin, this was the moment they began to see the LP as a canvas, each track a brushstroke. The result was an album with a unified voice, wrapped in a cover that announced its difference before the first note played. Rubber Soul reshaped how artists approach the studio, treating albums as statements, not just collections of songs. Today, that shift still fuels debates about authenticity and reinvention in music. The real legacy: creative boundaries exist only until someone dares to cross them. What lines will the next generation erase?